All right, Holly, you're good to go.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee. It is now 9:01, and we're going to open our meeting this morning, and we're going to take attendance. Please, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian Cochran will not be joining us. Andrea Comer will also not be joining us. Ellen McKitterick will not be joining us. John Scott, I don't see that he's joined us yet. Mike Soltis.
Here.
And Holly Williams.
Here.
All right, we do not have a quorum.
Thank you. And I know that some members may be coming in a little bit, but I'd like to thank any members of the public for joining us this morning. And given that we do not have a quorum and one is not anticipated this morning, we are going to table item number 2 from our agenda, which is review and approval of the June 28th meeting minutes. And we will move on to the presentation from our actuarial consultants, the Spring Group. And so if you all could begin, we would appreciate it.
Yes, good morning. I hope everyone's doing great. I'm going to pull up a presentation now and share my screen. Okay, so should see it now.
We can see your screen, Harinda.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the purpose of our presentation today is to present the results of our annual review program. So what I'll talk about is firstly the preliminary results for the fiscal year ending 2024, fiscal year 24, and then also provide a 3-year projection forward-looking fiscal years 2025, 26, and 27. So I'll just go into the next page. Okay. Yes. So like I said, so we perform this analysis annually, and so this is an update to the analysis that we've conducted over the last couple of years, and you know what we do provide quarterly updates on the results, so providing kind of an update based on what's happened in the last quarter and then comparing that to whatever our prior projection was. The purpose of this discussion today and what we're presenting today is to also provide the annual update, which includes a much more in-depth analysis. So we look at, as an example, all of the assumptions in more detail, and then we also prepare an annual report, which I'm sure will be provided to you as well. So there's a formal report that's written with the same results, and this provides a summary a bit for the presentation purposes. Okay. So I'll jump right in. The first, so this page provides actual results for the period July 2023 through June 2024, so fiscal year 2024, and it has the actual results or the preliminary results that we have so far, but the period compared to the last projection that we presented a few months ago. Okay, so overall, the fund balance at the beginning of the period, so this is as of July 1st, 2023, was 557.2 million, and that's a number that's net of outstanding contributions, or net of the reserve outstanding contributions and outstanding claims payments in respect of claims that have been incurred. And then we had net activity of 73.7 million in terms of the actual preliminary results. And then we have our prior projection of 76.3 million. So overall, the results are slightly lower, driven by a few offsetting factors. So one, contributions were greater by about $5 million. Investment income was also greater by about $2 million. Offsetting that, claims were higher, so that actually had a negative effect. So claims were high by about $10 million, to 380.8 million compared to 370.7 million. And other expenses reported was slightly lower than what we had previously projected. So overall, 73.7 million is the net activity that for the year. Now, this is preliminary. The one item that we typically update is at the end of July, we know actual contributions that have been paid in respect of this period. So we tend to update that. So that might be a small adjustment there as an example. But overall, we're sitting roughly around 74 million. So that puts us at a net ending fund balance, net of outstanding contributions and claims payments of 630.9 million. Which compares to 633.5 million that we had previously projected. So overall, the fund position remains strong. Our metrics are well within the target funding levels you can see below. So we continue to make the statement that the fund position remains strong with 630.9 million in the fund. Pause for a moment. Okay. So moving on to the next page. This page provides a graphical illustration of the same results. So you'll see overall revenue, if you're looking at the left-hand side. Overall revenue was 494.3 million, and expenses were 420.6 million. So offsetting the revenue. So our net fund balance, again, 630.9 million, which compares to, if you look at the right-hand side, you have the results of 633.5 million. This page provides the details of the numbers that we just provided. So again, you'll see the same results, just more detail. The one item that we'd like to comment on is the reserve, and I'll talk about that in the next page. So overall here, we have an estimated reserve of 53.7 million. So this is a reserve in respect of claims that have been incurred but not yet paid. That compares to a reserve of 54 million that we had previously estimated. So the reserve estimate, this is the breakdown of that reserve estimate. So we do a formal calculation of that reserve, and slightly lower by about 300,000. The case reserve, this is in respect of known claims, where they have outstanding payments, was estimated to be 27.9 million. The pending claims reserve, so this is in respect of claims that are still pending, incurred but pending, it's estimated to be 16.7 million. And the incurred but not reported claims reserve was 9.1 million overall. So that puts us at 53.7 million in total. That's reported on the books that we on the numbers that we showed in the prior pages. So that concludes the first portion of the presentation. I'll move on to the second portion of the presentation, which is the forward-looking projection. And a couple of things to note as we put these numbers up. One, we have seen increasing claims over the last several months, certainly even in the last month, where we saw a few weeks with over $8 million per week of claims. So we're trying to reflect all of this information in the projections. So we'll show you those results now. So overall, if you look at this projection for the next 3 years, we had the first year reported that you saw before. So overall ending fund balance of 630.9 million with net activity of 73.7 million. And then the projection shows that fund balance will grow by a small amount from 630.9 million to 665.4 million in that at the end of the first fiscal year, and on all to close to 700 million at the end of fiscal year 2027. And that is based on net activity of 34.5 million in fiscal year 2025, 19.1 million in fiscal year 2026, and then 10.3 million projected again in fiscal year 2027. So compared to some of the prior results you would have seen, this is lower, driven by the most recent claims experience, showing higher claims experience. So some of the assumptions behind this are reflective of those emerging experience. And as we always say, we continue to monitor this experience and continue to update as we get more and more information and make better estimates, have better assumptions, and continue to reflect the emerging experience as well. A couple other things I'll point out: contributions earned. So this is increasing from last period, 465.1 million up to 479.9 million, and so on. In part driven by increased, we have an assumption around increased wages. So this is reflecting those assumptions. It also reflects to a lesser extent, to a smaller extent, an impact based on an assumption around unemployment, changes in unemployment levels, and so on. You'll notice investment income, there's a bit of a drop off. So we have a higher earnings assumption for fiscal year 2025 that then decreases in fiscal years 2026 and 2027. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. And then the other expenses sitting at about 47.1 million. This is again based on the budget that's approved, and then increasing because we have each of those pieces increasing at different levels. So small increases in the administration budget and the AFLAC costs and so on. I'll provide a bit more detail in the next page. So this page provides a little bit of detail, and I wanted to particularly point out what we have related to the other other expenses as well. Maybe I'll start there. So we had 39.8 million previously, and one of the items here is 15 million that we had actually incurred for fiscal year 2024. The budget for the next year is 20 million. So we show that number here, so that is one of the items that's driving that increase. The second item is an increase to the assumption for AFLAC. So we have a budget of 25 million for that. So those two numbers in particular are driving this increase from 39 million to 47 million. And then we have small increases on those items going forward. Okay. I think that those are the main items here. I'll just jump back to this page and again point out the overall impact that I had mentioned before. So overall, again, we're going from 630.9 million with net activity of 34.5 million to 665.4 million. And then it keeps increasing from there, albeit to a greater rate, like to a lesser extent, because our net activity is starting to be smaller and over time, because we have higher claims projections in this period. And that's in part driven by increased incidence assumptions. So we continue to make an assumption around increased incidence all the way up to 2028, and we expect it to flatten out from there. And all those assumptions are in the appendices of this document, as well as in our formal report. Okay. Okay, I think those are the items I wanted to cover here. I'll also point out this page, where we have a graphical illustration of the results. So again, you can see the increased fund balance over time, and then also how we see the revenue relative to the spending expenses. And you'll see the expenses increasing at a greater level compared to the contributions or the income coming in. And that's part of our assumptions here. Okay. We are continuing to monitor and update these assumptions. We're also looking at updating the 10-year projection and looking at several scenarios around that. So more to come on that, and we'll be reporting that to you as well. For this purpose, we focus on the 3-year projection, and so we're presenting those results right now. Okay, I'll jump to the summary before we get any questions. So overall, net activity for the period was 73.7 million. The fund balance as a result of that, 630.9 million on an accrual basis, again, net of outstanding contributions and expenses, outstanding claims. Overall, based on our review of fund balance today, this fund balance is healthy, and it meets our target funding metrics. The fund is expected to increase by about 10% over the next 3 years. So because projected revenue is still higher than expenses, albeit that amount is the net activity is shrinking. So that difference between expenses and revenue is starting to look like it's getting closer to together. So it's something we want to look at very closely, and we're looking at multiple scenarios, especially on a 10-year basis, and we'll be reporting more of that in upcoming meetings. With that, I'll open it up for questions. So please, feel free.
To Mike, I think you're the only other member. Do you have a question? I have two questions, but I didn't know if you had questions you wanted to ask first.
Well, I do. I have two. One, just for my own understanding, Harendra, you had a category incurred but not reported. How do you project that? I mean, what do you look at?
Yeah, so this is the reserve for claims. I think that's what you're referring to. So I'll just flip back to this page. Yeah, is this what you were asking about, Mike?
Yes, IBNR. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we look at three things. So one, the case reserve. So this is in respect of known claims that have been reported, sort of started their claim. That is actually even though it's the biggest item here, it's actually the easiest one to provide a number for, because we actually get a file from AFLAC that tells us, okay, here are all the people that we know that have claims, and this is the amounts that we expect to pay for these people for the next until they're done with their claim. So we just take the total that they provide. We have the numbers by person, or I think we actually have the numbers by payment, but at the end of the day, it is just what's reported by AFLAC to us. The second item is slightly different. So we know also who is pending. So people who have submitted a claim, they're classified as pending. So we can then, based on that, and we also have an assumption. I think it's 77% is the updated assumption of the likelihood of a claim going from pending status to approved status. So we applied that factor. And we also have assumptions around how much people are getting paid for how long. So incident duration assumption, just how long, and also the average weekly benefit amount, so the average payment amount. So we apply all of that to come up with the amount for the pending claims. For the incurred but not reported, there's actually two pieces to it. One, the first number, the first part of it, which makes up the majority of this, we look at the history of number of claims per day to make an assumption around how many claims are coming in per day that actually eventually get approved. And then we look at particularly the last 2 months. There's a 45-day period. And we look at it and say how much is left based on what we have so far. So everything that's been approved and pending, take that all out. What's left that could come in based on our history of claims. So we come up with a number of claims based on that. So it's mostly for this last month because of the 45-day kind of time period that people have. So we come up with a count, and then we apply similar to the pending an average amount and duration to come up with that amount. There's one other small piece, which is the likelihood of claim that can recur. So somebody who kind of recovers or whatever, comes back to work and then goes back in, and that's assumed to be 10% the case reserve. So that's built into the numbers as well.
Okay.
We actually have all of that in some way here. I believe. Okay, no, we have it in the report. So in our report, we have all of that detail, all the numbers, basically all of the calculations laid out in our report as well.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, I think you mentioned, and we've heard previously, of late, we've been paying out approximately $8 million a week.
Yeah.
In your 3-year projection, how does that weekly payout increase?
It's a good question. I'll actually point us to a 3-year projection here just to help with that answer. So you'll see, so we have incurred claims. So that's a good indication of paid claims. So as an example, if I take let's just say this fiscal year 2026. Okay, so we have 445.5 million divided by 52, so that's about 8.6 million in fiscal year 2026. So this number is about, so it's greater than what we saw in the last month. So, and keep in mind, we it's not like we saw 8 million throughout the whole of the year. We only saw it just in this last few weeks.
Mhm.
So yes, we're factoring that in. We're also factoring in all of the other data to sort of establish at least a starting assumption around where we think the numbers will go. Now, granted, our actual calculations are a bit more complex, as you can imagine. We're projecting incidence levels, duration, population, covered population, all those things, salary increases, all of those factors into this. But this assumption, just to give you somewhere in the middle of this projection, it's about 8.6 million.
Yeah.
Mike, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation.
Yep, excellent.
So I had two follow up or two questions as well. The first is higher level, but so as we start to see the net, oh, hi, John, I see you. As we start to see the net activity decrease and we start to see the ending fund balance, I would imagine we're going to start to see the net activity continue to decrease as claims go up, and then to see that the growth in the fund balance to kind of level out so that we end up staying kind of around that, you know, just under $700 million mark in reserves in that fund. Is that what you anticipate kind of starting to see, if we could kind of foreshadow what the 10-year projection is going to show? Or am I oversimplifying? Nope. I think we lost him.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Looks like I
That's
popped
okay.
for that. I think I'm back in.
Yeah. So did you hear my whole question? So I
did
think,
not. Sorry.
okay, so I think the crux of my question is, I think if we could kind of look forward, if I could kind of foreshadow what I expect to see in your 10-year projection, is we're going to start to see the growth in our ending fund balance start to kind of level off. So it's going to taper down from that, you know, cumulative 10% growth we've seen over the past few years, and we're going to start to kind of see it level out. I guess it'll be interesting to see whether or not we start to erode that fund balance on the middle of that 10-year projection. So I guess that's more of a statement than a question. But I think that's kind of where the trend seems to be taking us.
Yes.
Is that fair? Okay.
That's fair. And, you know, what I'll say is, you know, there's a lot that's changing, especially we're seeing huge increases in claims the last little bit. So we're trying to reflect all of that as best we can in our assumptions. So even a small change can result in, certainly getting to that flat state or even into a negative net activity position. So that's why we want to update all of our analyses, run multiple scenarios, and provide more detail to you as well. Because yes, that is a very fair statement, Holly.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a precipitous decline in that net activity. So I think we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on that. And then my next question is actually related to your initial presentation, slide 5, where you have the benchmarks for, and I apologize. Yeah. So the targets for reserves versus net fund balance. So it seems as though, so I guess my question is, when you do your 10-year projection, I think it might be interesting to see this table reflecting like how the projections meet up against the target because to me, that's a nice little snapshot of how we're meeting what the target standards are for the health of our fund, giving whatever the financial modeling is. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
it does. And yes,
All right.
we will be providing that. Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then my last question is, when you do your financial modeling for our forward projections, I just want confirmation. It includes the sensitivity analysis with regards to modest changes here and there in any of our inputs in the assumptions, correct?
Yes, so we are
Okay.
looking at like a multiple scenarios, I'll call it. So yes, so that should basically effectively give you sensitivity analysis, and then as we have this model set up, it's easy to also modify different assumptions and see what happens if this changed or this changed. So we can always even produce literally an infinite amount of scenarios to look at. So we try to kind of give you kind of what might be the most useful, and work with the team, Erin, and the team to make sure we provide you with the right information. Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful. I appreciate that. John, you had a question. You had your hand up.
Thank you. Corinda, do we have statistics? Our benefit is basically a certain percentage of wages up to a certain maximum dollar amount. Do we know how many of our claimants are reaching those maximums versus somewhere in the middle? And is there a trending towards the maximum benefit?
Maybe I'll defer
Corinda, do you want me to jump in on that?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, hi, John. So we do get quarterly. I'm pausing on the quarterly because I'm pretty sure it's quarterly. But it's definitely multiple times a year. Updates from Department of Labor where they have a report that they can run for us showing the 4 categories: folks who don't meet the 23-25 and therefore aren't eligible, folks who are over 23-25 but less than 40 times the Connecticut minimum wage, folks who are between 40 and 60 times the Connecticut minimum wage, and folks who are at the 60 times Connecticut minimum wage or greater. So those are our 4 categories. And we do track kind of what our percentages are for our claims versus what we see in the general workforce. And we can definitely pull that together into a trending chart. I say we, meaning mostly Locke, because that exceeds my Excel capacity for creating charts, but I know that Locke can do that. So that's something we can share.
Okay, so I guess I'm just thinking about, I apologize for being a few minutes late, so I missed the first part of it, but I saw that 10-year trend where our income seems to be meeting our reserve, or payouts and income are kind of meeting at the middle there, where we might be a little upside down. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't also, as we do these projections, be having a conversation about what if we reduce the benefit by $100 and that type of thing to preserve our funds.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that is going to be something that we've always been looking at. Where are we and what are our options? And one of the things that we will need to keep a close eye on is kind of what is that long-term health. We have a few different elements that go into the mix, including the anticipated investment income, the claims, the expenses, and all of that. So you're absolutely on the right track that we have to just kind of pay attention to all of those factors. And having that 10-year look gives us that time to really run different models and then start projecting ahead as to what levers to push. One option that I'm interested in also exploring is all of our money is in the STIF account, which is the short-term investment funds. We had a conversation a couple of years ago with the Treasurer's Office about whether there's any value in putting any of that money in potentially higher interest, I would say medium term investment. It was too early to really pursue that 2 years ago, but that's something we're also going to look to see. So we've got a few different levers, but we look at this all the time. We spend a lot of time on the phone with Harindra and Viva. And just to foreshadow something that we'll be sharing at the board meeting, we've also asked Spring to do this in-depth analysis twice a year instead of just once a year, just so that we get those quarterly updates, but we don't always do the deep dive. And so we think we should be doing that twice a year.
Thank you. And my last question is, do we have any documentation we can see from other states to see if our trending is comparable to what other states are doing? I don't know if they do similar actuarial reports like this, or if there's something we can extrapolate, like California is doing, equally as well, or we're doing worse than them, or something like that. Do we have some kind of comparisons?
So we ran a lot of that last fall, and we're trying to compile data to share that again as we move forward. It's tricky. Different states do different things. So some states have outside actuaries, other states don't. Some states report in a very easy to find format, other states don't. And the age of the program definitely impacts the trends, right? So we are busy sort of gathering what information we can get from other states. But as we knew last fall, COVID kind of put everybody upside down a bit. Even those older states reported that their previous trends had to all be recalculated because between COVID and I would say greater national awareness of paid leave, and that translated into higher claims, everybody's been readjusting their projections. So we're doing what we can, but the data's not great.
Okay, thank you.
And I mean that to say it's not incredibly robust, and it's not incredibly helpful for projections. It's just like the data set isn't what you would want if you were trying to really hone in, as opposed to making any value judgments about the state of anybody else's programs.
It's almost too bad there isn't some sort of universal standard that we could all follow and then be able to compare notes.
We keep talking about that amongst the states, that we need standard definitions. That's honestly, that's our first point. We don't have standard definitions across the states. But now that we're getting kind of a critical mass, we talk a lot about trying to make sure that when we report out on our data, we're doing it consistently so that it makes it easier to compare.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Erin and Harinda. I think this is just a follow-up kind of data thought. And I think I asked this, if not last year, then the year before, but I know that our program is income replacement for the period of qualified leave, but I'd be interested to see as we go through, as we continue through, this unique economic cycle, what the relationship, if any, is between unemployment statistics and program statistics that we see on our paid leave side, to see if there's any relationship there. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I know that the programs nationally are not mature enough to see enough. We haven't been through enough of an economic cycle to see what, if any, relationship or insights we can glean from the two. But I think that'd be something to be mindful of as we kind of track data moving forward. Sometimes we do it, we're always late to the party. So I'm just wanted to throw that out there at the beginning.
Polly, are you suggesting, I'm just trying to make sure we understand your suggestion. Are you suggesting that we look to see if there's, higher rates of unemployment equate to higher claims, or the inverse? We anticipate that higher rates of unemployment may result in some increase in claims initially, but then it reduces.
And
right?
that's what
Because
I
we
would
do have that
expect to see
tail.
too.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
that's what
the
I
kind
would,
of thing.
right, but I think you and I both know that sometimes, you know, it's easier to build in, the data gathering framework on the front end
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to apply that retrospectively. So I think we're at a unique opportunity now to kind of be, and I honestly hate this word, but to be very intentional about how we look at that data
Yeah.
moving forward, not to presuppose some outcome or correlation, but just to look at it moving forward to see if there's anything interesting that's happening and kind of what that means as we go out. I know we like to look at our claims, but I know we include unemployment as an assumption and a data point in all our modeling, but I'd be curious just to see if our hypothesis is correct and to kind of watch it play out in real time as opposed to kind of look at it retrospectively. So that was my only comment. But yes, Aaron, my thoughts are the same as yours. John,
Okay.
you had your hand up, and I know we're going to lose you soon, Aaron.
Yeah.
I just have one more question. Aaron started to answer the question, but I really wanted to ask kind of a similar question to Herinda about when you're projecting claims, are you projecting claims based on the fact that people are hitting our maximums, or is there some number in the middle with respect to what people are hitting as far as replacement of their income?
Some number in the middle. It's kind of the simple answer. So we are looking at historically what's been paid out, the last several years, several months, and kind of projecting that amount forward, which is not the maximum. It's below the maximum. People are not obviously getting paid the maximum, the most they can get paid. So it isn't that number. It's below that.
And
John,
when we send out this slide deck, you'll see, John, I think it's in the slide deck, some of those assumptions. Right,
yes,
Karen?
we actually have all of the assumptions in the back. So I'll just maybe point out what we have. So we have a table here that lays out the assumptions, and then there's several tables referred to here, which are all laid out as well. So even table D, as an example, does show what we've assumed by benefit. And it's also interesting because the amount varies, at least based on the data that we've seen in the past.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. So some interesting trends there. So bonding, as an example, is a higher number relative to pregnancy. So, okay. So yes, so we have a lot of that here, and also in our report that we provide. Let's go back to the page I was on.
Yep, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rindra and Viva.
Sure.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move on. And Dave, you're going to walk us through an update on the financial and accounting policies.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Let's see. The share button will work. Okay.
You can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you.
Sorry, Steve, just before you get started, I'm going to drop now. So thank you to the committee members. I apologize I have to leave early, but I appreciate your time this morning, and I hope you all have a good afternoon.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to give you a quick update on finance and accounting policies. It's that time of year again when we review the finance and accounting policies and make any changes that need to be made as a result of things that happen over the year. There was more so of those in prior years when we were starting out, but these days, as we're more in a steady state, there's not that many changes that needed to be made. The more significant changes were, number one, our authority's annual report is now due September 1st. Previously, it had been due in July, but at the last legislative session this year, that was changed so that all our reports were due on September 1. And so we reflected that in the policy. Another change we made was as a result of credit card expenses now being approved in Bill's spend and expense module. So thanks to Shelley Matias in my department for spearheading that, because as a result of that, Bill spend and expense now automates it such that there's an approval for workflows. You can attach the documentation. It syncs up with QuickBooks Online automatically. So what does that mean? It means there's no more need for a manual journal entry, which had been the policy previously. So that was changed. Other clarifications we had in the policy were that the audited financials are presented to the board. They're not approved by the board, so we changed the wording to accurately reflect that. The other item was the policy had stated that there was a reconciliation of the authority's administrative fee. This had come about because originally in the policy, the authority's administrative fee was going to be a percentage of contributions. But that was changed as a result of discussion with this committee. I think at your observation, Mike Soltis, if I'm remembering correctly, was that the administrative fees tend to be more fixed in nature. And now that we have a history, it's based on expense history. So that's what the budget is based on. It's not based on a percentage of contributions. So since that's not happening anymore, there's no need to reconcile that anymore because there's nothing to reconcile. Now, the administrative fee, the actual administrative fee is, of course, compared to the budget on a monthly basis on the financials, which you see. So that's still happening. But since the actual determination of the administrative fee is different now, there's no need to reconcile something that's not calculated anymore. Other minor updates were we formatted the document just to make it a little nicer and neater. My thanks to Liliana Andujar in my department for helping out with that because she knows Word much better than I ever will. We clarified certain abbreviations such as GAAP and GASB just to define them, what they are, in case other non-accounting based readers didn't know what they are. We updated the annual budget internal schedule so that it agreed with the plan of operations deadlines that were updated previously in the plan of ops. And we also updated the journal entry template that we have for the daily reporting of the contributions because as the year goes on, we're always fine tuning it and making it better. So we just wanted the policy to accurately reflect what the latest and greatest was. So those are the relatively minor policy updates that we're making. We're going to bring those to the board next month, let them know. We'll put them out for public comment, and then we'll ultimately vote on the approval of those policies. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
All right. Thank you, Dave, for bringing us through that. And we will now move on to our budget review of spending to date.
Okay. Highly like you, I have the latest and greatest Zoom, and I swear they move the buttons every time they update it.
I know.
So-
And maybe it's some inside joke that we all missed.
All right, so let's see. Here we go. Okay. All right, so these are the financial results for the month of June and the end of our fiscal year. So for the month of June, our operating expenses were $1.2 million. That was almost $177,000 ahead of budget for the month. Our expenses for the year were just under $13.4 million. And so we had a $3.9 million positive variance. Our expenses for the month were the usual ones, payroll and related expenses at over 652,000. IT consultants at 142,000. That was for 2 months of payments to the consultants. We made our annual insurance policy payments of $132,000. The good news there was that was less than what we budgeted. We worked with our insurance folks on that, and they came up with a number that not only was less than what was budgeted, but was less than what we paid last year. So thanks to them for that. Other expenses include contact center of almost 129,000 and outreach expenses of $91,000. So like I said, no big surprises there. Moving on to bond funds, there were no bond funds for this month, so no changes there are outstanding. Bond money available is $2.4 million. Starting in the next fiscal year, we do expect to use more of the bond money for projects such as fund recovery, which we're making improvements on there. Moving on to the contribution budget, our net activity for the month was $33.3 million. That was slightly worse than budget at $23,000, but that's because of a timing difference. We made our annual bond repayment of $2.1 million. We had budgeted it earlier in the fiscal year because when we did the budget last year, we hadn't quite finalized the payment terms. But now that the payment terms are finalized and we make the payment in June, you could see where we were pretty close year to date of what we expected it to be. Two things I want to point out. Contributions were somewhat lower than what we budgeted for the month at $1.8 million, somewhat offset by our fund recovery efforts of almost $270,000. Our investment income was just under $2.6 million, better than budget by $706,000 because of a better investment rate. And our benefits paid for the month were $32.8 million. As Harindra had noted before, we have noticed that our benefit payments are going up. And for the month of June, that averaged $8.2 million a week. As we indicated before, we are looking at that. We are monitoring that and seeing what kind of effect that will have long term. Year to date, for the contribution fund, our activity was $67.6 million, and that was $54.7 million ahead of budget. We were ahead of budget on all categories. The contribution fund, on a cash basis, was almost $566.1 million. If you're saying to yourself, hey, I thought Harindra said that the fund balance was $630.9 million. He did. You heard him correctly. He also said that was on an accrual basis. And the biggest driver of the accrual basis is that the contributions that are received in July are almost all for the second quarter of the year, because there's a grace period of 1 month without any penalty or interest. And so, as we've seen consistently month to month, almost all employers and their payroll providers pay that grace period month, which is July. So that's included in Harindra's numbers. He's got the July contributions in there. So that's why his is somewhat higher than what we have here. But we'll see that number increase next month in July for sure. We're starting to see the money come in now. And for the balance sheet, no changes there. The largest asset continues to be our short-term investment fund, $548 million. And I'll just note that on the liability side, our bond funds payable was reduced for the annual payment for our bond funds to the state that we made this month. So, no projections this month because we're at the end of the fiscal year, so there's nothing to project. But those are our results for the fiscal year. Certainly willing to take any questions anybody has on our financial results at this time.
I don't have any questions.
I don't either. Oh, John, did you have any?
Oh, I'm all set.
All set? Okay. Thanks, Dave, for walking us through that. Do we have any old business, new business?
No.
All right, because we didn't have a quorum, I will just close our meeting today and we're ending it at 9:51 a.m. I appreciate everybody joining us this morning during the summer, and I hope everybody has a nice weekend.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
as
you.
well.
You too. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.